Podcast, episode number 6. Brayley and KJ. Hey, buddy. How's it going?
Solid, man. How are you?
I'm good. I love days that we record the podcast. I also really love days where we get to have friends on the podcast.
Yeah, I love when you get to have your friends on the podcast too, because your friends are cool, man.
I've been lucky enough over the years to meet some really cool people, and today's guest is definitely one of those really cool people that I have stayed in contact with. And you and I were talking yesterday on the phone that Jake and I's worlds kind of have been the same for a while, where, you know, we both started in rock music, and then I went on the road and he was on the road, and then we both about at the same time ended up in country music. And I think that that's kind of funny to see, and I'm really excited to dive into that with Jake today.
His music is insane. Like, if I was to tell you that there was an artist that is out that I'm like, that is my kind of country music, it's Jake. Honestly, he's just unbelievable. I'm a huge fan of his. There's
a little bit of rap in there. You definitely get that rock and roll side, but it's also straight down the middle country music.
Yeah, I love it, man. Tractor Town is insane. On repeat with that EP.
Yeah, right, me too. Jake Rowe is going to be on the podcast today. We'll get into that in just a second, but let's do some housekeeping really quickly. We haven't done this over the last few episodes, but one thing that we do here on the Hook Podcast, if you're new, we like to pull back the curtain. We like to bring on songwriters and unknown artists and people who have cool stuff going on in Nashville that you may have never heard the name, but maybe you've heard a song that they've written. And that's what we do here. And one thing that we also do is we don't have anybody telling us what to do. So we get to pick the people we want. We don't play music because we don't want anybody to lose out on the credits of that, and we don't want anybody's copyright issues being there, because we want everybody to be paid, because Spotify doesn't pay very well, so we don't want to hinder that situation at all. But one thing that we do have is a playlist that you make.
Yeah, I'm labeling it the best playlist on Spotify right now. So if you're looking for the best playlist on Spotify, come check out the Hook Podcast playlist. We put a lot of love into it. We put a lot of thought into this playlist too. A good chunk of them are people that we're going to have on the show or attempt to, or people that we just like. But we do a lot of research too about artists that are up and coming, or songwriters that you may not know the songs that they have out, but we try and have a really good mix. And it's solid. I listen to it all the time. So
I do
check
too.
It out.
It's really cool on the playlist. Like you said, there's stuff that not just stuff we talk about on the podcast, stuff that we dig into. And that's what I'm really excited about, people hearing the playlist. When you're in there, make sure you follow the playlist. Just search The Hook Podcast. It'll show up in the playlist tab, and then our podcast will show up in there as well. When you're in there, please follow The Hook Podcast on whatever platform you're on. We are at The Hook Pod on most platforms, on all platforms now, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Follow us on YouTube, because nobody's backing us here. We just do our own thing. Everything that you see here is just KJ and I all on our own. So we appreciate everybody's help and feedback and getting our name out there for sure. And here we go. Episode number 6 with my buddy, Jake Rose, on the Hook Podcast. Episode 6 of the Hook Podcast. And it's always fun when we get to bring on friends. And that's kind of something that we've wanted to do on here. And also people who have a different little background than just your straight up, I went to Nashville right away and got a pub deal and started cutting records. And this guy has a very fun background, and I've had the chance to get to know him over the last, 10 years or so. And I'm excited. Jake Rose on the podcast today. Hey, buddy.
What's going on, guys?
Good. How is it in Nashville today?
It's not bad. It's a little chilly, but nothing compared to Minnesota,
Yeah, you were just home, right? You were just home in Minnesota?
Yeah, I went back for Christmas and visited the family safely, of course. But it snowed 11 inches the first day I got there, which was a reminder of what the winter's like up there.
I loved your Insta story. You had said it's supposed to snow 11 inches, so I got to get the tractor ready. I was like, yep, that's small town feel right there, man.
Exactly, dude. Yep, Bobcat, tractor, for anything we could do to push snow, man.
Well, thanks for jumping on with us, man. We really appreciate it. And like I said, it's fun to bring on people that we know. And I know your story, but I think it's going to be fun to dive into this. And you've got some big stuff on the horizon, and some big stuff that you just did too. And you had a career before you were in Nashville. So it's going to be fun to dive into that.
Oh, awesome. I'm excited too, man.
So, Jake, you grew up outside of Minneapolis, correct?
Yep. I grew up in Hamill, Minnesota. So it's about 20 minutes outside west of the cities. So.
Okay. And you grew up on a pumpkin farm. Is that actually true?
That's actually true. I was back there this fall picking pumpkins. I always still go back every year no matter what I'm doing, even if I'm on tour or whatever, or I could have the biggest, I could be opening up an arena show, but then my dad puts me right back to reality and says, get on the tractor, we got to get these pumpkins picked. But yeah, I grew up on a farm. I grew up on a crop farm first. We did hay and corn and soybeans and wheat. And then my dad got into doing pumpkins. And so then we kind of became a pumpkin farm.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Your dad, he played country music?
Yeah, my dad had a band with my uncle Bob, and they farmed together, and then they had this band called Stampede. And it was basically like Southern rock. Like they did Charlie Daniels, Leonard Skinner, Allman Brothers, Bob Seger, kind of classic rock, Southern rock, Molly Hatchet, ZZ Top. So I just kind of have that ingrained in me. Even at a young age, my dad used to play Sweet Home Alabama, and I used to think he wrote it because he would play it. And he said, I'm like, that's my dad's song. And he sounded just like it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm like, that's my dad's song. But yeah, so that's kind of my background. That's where I got, I think, my love for country.
I was gonna say that was my next question. Is that where you scored that love for country music, was hanging out with him and watching them play live in those bars and places like that?
Yeah, and then those classic songs, right? And then I listened to country music that my uncle or my dad would always have country on in the tractors, and I would just spend a lot of time riding in the tractors because there's nothing else to do. And so, or if we were at the shop back at the farm, like they just always had country radio on. And to be honest with you, when I was younger, sometimes I'd be like, I don't know, I've heard this stuff so many times. But it was engraved in me. And then all of a sudden I find myself now going like, oh my gosh, I know all these songs because that's what my dad used to listen to. And I'd say, I think, in the late 2010s ish or whatever, when the FGLs and the Jason Aldean started coming out and playing distorted guitars, and that started sounding like Skynyrd and stuff, I started to kind of go, wait a second, that's what I want to do. And like, that's kind of, I didn't know you could do that in country, and you really couldn't before. And then, they're doing hip hop phrasing and all this stuff. And that's when I really turned an ear and kind of was like, it
used to be called rock and roll. Now it's called country.
Exactly. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of what turned me on there, but that's my background.
Any artist you remember listening to as a kid that now you listen to and you're like, yeah, because for me, when I was a kid, that's all my parents listened to was country music. So like you, and then I kind of faded off. I got into hip hop, I got into rock and punk and a bunch of other stuff. And then I came back to it as an adult, and I'm like, actually, I relate a lot to this stuff now because I'm an adult and I get it. But is there anyone that you remember listening to that you've kind of gone back to?
I would say Kenny Chesney. I mean, he was all over the radio back then. And I remember the time just being like, God, I heard these songs so many times. And when you're a kid, you're like, Eminem just put a record out, you know what I mean? But I liked the songs back then, but now when I see him and hear him, and they just sound so classic, No Shirt, No Shoes, No Problems. I mean, Summertime, all those songs to me just are like, I'm like obsessed with Kenny Chesney now, but I think I had to be old enough to appreciate him and all these songs. And I'm not looking for adrenaline every time I'm listening to a song now. I want to listen to a song and drink a beer, and his music really hits me now. So that's one for me.
And you've got to open up for, you did the McGraw, that was the McGraw Stadium tour, correct? That you opened for?
Yeah, the Soul to Soul. Yep.
Yeah. And awesome. Then with that, was that like a throwback for you when you were like, okay, I remember hearing this guy on the radio?
Oh yeah. Well, Tim McGraw, I should have said him too. Cause he's definitely one. And then getting to meet him and play with him, that kind of all sealed that together. What's a crazy one is, I would say with Tim, and going to what you had just said, is Live Like You Were Dying. I must have heard that song 1,000 times when I was a kid. And I did always love that song. I always thought, man, I don't really listen to country a ton back then when I was younger, because that's what my dad listened to. But I always remember thinking that song is just a great song. And then now I write with Craig Wiseman and Tim Nichols all the time. Craig's one of my really close friends who wrote Live Like You Were Dying, and then I opened for Tim. And so that just kind of all felt like, man, I heard this song on the tractor, and now I'm writing with the guy that wrote it. This is a full circle.
And we'll get into you riding with Wiseman later, because I have a whole bunch of questions. Because Wiseman is a character. I've never met the guy, but every time I see anything with Wiseman, I'm like, he looks like he is so much fun to have a beer with, especially in your Econoline video, like when you guys were doing your thing on your YouTube channel.
Yeah. He was having a beer in that video.
Yeah.
Even though we may have been driving around.
That's funny.
He
So
wasn't driving. I was driving.
Jake was driving. So let's skip all the way back. You grew up in Minnesota, and then came the rock band.
Yep.
And that's how you and I know each other. As most of our listeners know, I started in active rock, and I actually met Jake when I first started in radio. You were on the road with, it was you guys and Puddle of Mud and Chevelle.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
That was the tour that we met on. And I look back and think of that whole time in your life is completely different than now. Let's go back there and talk about how all of the New Medicine stuff started.
Well, yeah, New Medicine started in high school, really, with me and Dan, the guitar player, and he was just. I had another band in high school, and I was really serious about it. And then all of a sudden, the two guys that were in my band, they had to go to college, so I was like, I need to start a new band. And then Dan kind of listened to the same music as I did. We were listening to Thrice and Seosin and all these bands. So we started a band then, and which ended up turning into New Medicine. But there was a couple older guys, older than us, that had a band that we thought was kind of successful in, Minneapolis area. And so we recruited Matt Brady to play bass, who was in that band. He was older than us, but that's where the band started. And it just started with, writing songs in my barn. And then we met a producer, Steve Hodge, and another guy, Colt Lieb, and they recorded a couple EPs for us. And we just kind of hit the ground running, and we just, we weren't looking for a record deal. We just were trying to do our thing. We just wanted to make our music, and we liked the way the record sounded. And we love the music we were making, and no one was telling us anything to do. So we just kept doing it. And we'd flyer shows after an arena would get out, and we'd hand out flyers to come see our shows and stuff. And we just kind of started building up a buzz. And then one day we had some guy starting to try to manage us at the time. And he said, man, this rep from Atlantic Records is hitting me up about you guys. And we went through like a 2-year thing of record label meetings, and we thought we were getting signed at South by Southwest, and we were going to sign with Interscope, and we played for Epic Records. Allison Hagendorf, who now runs Spotify, she had us play for her in New York for Epic. And it was during that time where the music industry was so volatile, like the whole staff at Epic changed like a week later. So then all of a sudden we couldn't, they'd offered us a deal, but we had to, all the team that offered us the deal were gone like a month later. And so we just kept kind of grinding, but all of a sudden, and I remember we played for Atlantic Records and they passed on us. We went to New York, played for them, they passed. And then about a year later, we were on tour with Candlebox, and we were in New York City, and Atlantic had another subsidiary called Photo Finish Records. So it was Photo Finish and Atlantic Records. And the same thing happened with Atlantic, where the head of A&R was the new person now. It was Pete Gambarg now. And so everything was kind of different, even though we thought, man, they passed on us. I don't know about them. Well, that night at the show, they were like, Atlantic was there, Photo Finish was there. And right after the show, they were like, we're offering you a deal. This is for real. Like, you're going to have paperwork next week. Like, we promise this is a real thing, and don't worry about what happened, a year ago with Atlantic. Like, this is a new staff or whatever. And so we were like, all right. And it came true. And we signed with Atlantic and Photo Finish.
What was it like when you got signed? Was it what you thought it was going to be? You're going through that process. I'm sure you think about, what is it going to be like once we get signed, and what did it feel like after you finally inked that deal?
It was like it felt like a long time coming. You know what I mean? Like, we just kind of felt like we almost were there. We were almost there. We were almost there. And then honestly, when we signed the deal, we were just ready to get to work at that point. We were just kind of like, awesome. Now we got that. So now can we go on tour? And we really just wanted to keep touring and make our record and then get back on the road, because we just loved playing shows and being on the road and seeing new cities and all that stuff. But it was definitely surreal, and we definitely took a second. I remember partying and thinking, wow, we got a record deal. And we're from Minneapolis. I mean, there was only a few people that get signed out of there, so we felt lucky and we were inspired and everything. But a lot comes at you at that time, right? Like, we had to get a manager, we had to get an agent, and they're all asking you these questions, and we're trying to pick a producer. We're trying to pick the songs. They're sending me off to Nashville, to New York, to LA to write songs with all these random people I've never met. And so it was just a lot at once. And now that I'm older, I can look back and think, I would have done that different. I would have done that different. But, it was a great experience, and it got me to here. So I can't say anything,
So when I saw you guys for the first time, you were a band that I had never heard of. You guys were at the beginning of the bill. There was multiple bands on that tour specifically, but I do remember distinctly you came out on stage and the first thing you said was, "Hey, we're New Medicine from Minneapolis, Minnesota. We only have 10 minutes, so let's effing go," or something like that. And all of a sudden you guys just kicked into something and it was like a kick in the face. And every single person there was like, yeah, this is really good. Awesome. We met after the show and I was like, okay, this is cool. And then I followed along and, so going back to the New Medicine days, you guys were one of those bands who toured really hard. What is that favorite rock venue? Because some of the venues you play now are completely different than the venues you were playing then.
Well, yeah, I know for sure. I'm trying to think. I mean, First Avenue in Minneapolis is obviously on top of my list because it's iconic, Prince's venue, and it's kind of like the place to play if you've made it in Minneapolis, I guess. But there's a couple different spots that we've hit a lot of times. Even like Bogart's in Cincinnati. I mean, I'm not saying it's like the shiniest place ever, but we had a lot of good shows there. I mean, I have to say Irving Plaza in New York City because Allman Brothers Live at Fillmore East was recorded there, but also we got signed there that night, and so that place has got a special place in my heart for sure. And then coolest places, I mean, Red Rocks. I played there with Kings Leon once, and that's top of my list of coolest. I can't wait to get back there someday. Let's go.
Let's go to that. Let's go to you playing Red Rocks. Like, how did that whole situation come about? And Kings Leon, and at that time, Kings Leon was ginormous.
Yes. Well, when we opened from, actually, it was, I don't remember. They were on which record? That record was just about to come out. And it was a festival, but we were on the bill and we were on at 5 and they were on at 7 or whatever. And they were big. They had the record with the light bulb on it. I can't remember which one that is. And then only by the night, I think the big record was about to come out. And so they were big. And actually, we were like the first on the bill, but it was a festival with Flaming Lips were headlining. And it was sold out. So it was crazy. And we went down to the back room there and, everyone signs the wall. I mean, there's like Rage Against the Machine, people, Jerry Garcia's signature on the wall. I mean, you're like, whoa. And it was crazy. And actually, Kings Leon and I have the same attorney, and I've actually got to know those guys now. But back then, we were just kind of like, whoa, look at those guys. And they're one of my favorite bands. So
I think that's most musicians' dream is to play Red Rocks. And then for people like KJ and I who live here, we go, yeah, Red Rocks. That's the place. Like that.
The Beatles played Red Rocks.
I didn't know that.
There, yeah.
Really? I mean, it was unbelievably cool. I mean, just to be there. And then I actually got to go. Our producer who produced our first record, Bill Stevenson, produces Rise Against, and they played there with Rancid one night while we recorded our record in Colorado, but. We got to go backstage again with Rise Against, and that was really cool too. And that was
they're drummers from here.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yep, exactly. So
that's kind of
their music. New Medicine kind of reminded me a little bit of Rise Against, like the way you sing, just the energy, like definitely.
Yeah, I was definitely inspired by them for sure. I think their first 2-3 records, and that one record was huge. Revolution, or what was that record called? I can't remember. I'm so bad with names. I just remember the cover. Nice style of CDs, you know what I mean? But and I got to meet them. They were really nice guys, which was cool.
So going into New Medicine, one thing that going back and listening, which I love the first New Medicine record. I love both the New Medicine records, but the storytelling was there. That country music storytelling was definitely there in both those New Medicine records. Was that something that was like very on top of mind for you to write those party songs? Cause that was what was big in rock music at that point, but also to make sure that all of that very intricate storytelling was there.
Yeah. To be honest, like that's the only way I know how to write. Cause that's probably just cause that's all the songs I listen to. I mean, I'm not exactly, too metaphorical all the time. I'm more like, I'm trying to tell something that you really relate to you. Like, some people have really trippy lyrics. Like, I don't know what Radiohead's talking about half the time, but I like it. You know what I mean? But I couldn't write songs like that because they have to make sense in my head, and songs like Rich Kids was just like, I told Kevin Kadish, who I still work with today, I was in the studio with him and I said, he's like, so tell me about your life. And I'm like, well, man, I went to school with a bunch of rich kids, man. I was like the poor farm kid. She's like, let's write that, rich kid. So tell me about it. And I was like, well, I didn't go to college. And that was the first verse. And we just started writing about my life. And that's what I still do today with country is, do the same thing. But, when I was turning songs into Atlantic, I kept getting back, man, this kind of sounds like a country song. Can I go more rock, I guess? You know what I mean? And it was like a struggle for me because I was like, well, I love these songs kind of thing. But, here we are all these years later, and I think I'm somewhere in the middle, which is kind of cool.
I would agree with that 100%.
Mm-hmm. But you're absolutely right. I mean, I've always been telling stories, and I've always loved that. Little Sister song on the first record is about my sister that passed away, and that was like a fan favorite of ours. But yeah, so I try to write from a real place. You know what I mean?
What was the first step that you took toward country music, and what was it that kind of made you like fully take that step? Because it is very different sound. I mean, I can tell it's you when I listen to both, but like if you would have presented New Medicine in your country stuff, I wouldn't even think that you're the same artist, because right. It is very, very different. So what was the first step that you took to go towards that, and what kind of pushed you to do that?
I'll tell you, it's a number of things. I mean, like I said earlier about my story about how I kind of came from that, and there's just started to be a point when I was turning in songs and like, this sounds country, and I thought, well, if it sounds country, that's what I want to be. And at this time, our first record came out in 2010. Exactly when like FGL came out, Cruise, and I'm like, dang, what is this? And Jason Aldean's got drop C guitars, but he had really awesome songs. I was like, stadiums of people sing along to these songs. And I started feeling like the rock thing, that rock bands were big, in the 2000s. They were playing arenas, and, I know people give Nickelback shit, but they were playing arenas, and Shinedown like had a huge song right when I got signed. To be honest, there wasn't anything. It was like the guitars on the radio were like on pop radio and on mainstream. No one was putting guitars on anything, and that wasn't cool to be a rock band. And I felt we were getting pushed to be like metal, I guess. And I'm not metal. You know what I mean? Like, I'm rock. I like to rock. You know what I mean? But I like to rock like AC/DC or, or even like, I don't know how Bob Seger would rock, I guess. And the storytelling with some distorted guitars, but it just became way more about screaming and metal guitars. And I was leaning away from that. And I started writing more stuff that leaned more towards country. And I started identifying with that. And while we were doing I think it was on our second record, I was just writing songs, and I thought, let's write a couple country songs. We wrote this one song called Crank It Up, and Colt Ford I wrote it with Jason Aldean's drummer and my friend Kevin. And we wrote the song called Crank It Up, and then Colt put it out. And all of a sudden I had a song on a record, and then he asked me if I wanted to write another song with him. And so I said, sure. And we wrote another song, and I got another song on his record. And, next thing I know, I didn't really know how big Colt Ford was, but we were like number 2 on Billboard, and we had the number 1 rap album, and cause he's country rap. Yeah. And that's awesome. That kind of opened my eyes also. And I was like, wait a minute, you can kind of rap, you can kind of have guitars, you can write a song like all in one. And I was like, that's kind of everything I like to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Country music is very diverse at this point in its structure. There are a lot of different layers. I mean, I sometimes will dig into like the Americana stuff and get into some of those bands and groups, and they're kind of rock in a way, but it's like indie country. And then you have this other side that's super pop, and then you have the classic country, and then you have the rock guys, and it's very diverse. It's interesting.
Yeah. And I was drawn to that because I don't like to wake up every day and be the same thing. Like, I like to kind of be like, man, what am I feeling today? And yeah, that opened my eyes to like, wow, that's cool. And you know what? I'm not a purist in any form. Like, I'm not like, I don't think it's good to like lock yourself into a box and be like, I'm only doing this. Like, I'm not putting anything but these 4 things on my record. And I have all the respect in the world for all these different kind of artists. You know what I mean? That, there's, like you said, there's like these kind of organic, like your Jason Isbells and your Sturgill Simpsons. I love those guys.
Yeah.
But I'm also not going to, say I don't love FGL and their shiny, awesome FM radio songs. I love them. And I think you can love them both. You know what I mean?
Agreed. 100%.
So you're not even in town and you're getting cuts. What was the decision process then to go, okay, I know that people can rap in country music. I'm getting songs on, on Billboard, and you're having success. What was the decision process then to go, okay, I'm going to Nashville?
Well, I had been writing here, so I actually wrote that song here in Nashville, but I'd been just taking trips, and I had some good relationships at that point where I would say, hey, can I sleep on your couch or your extra bedroom or whatever? And so I would just stay here for like a month at a time. And it was one of those trips where I was writing for the second album. And it took we were in the middle of an album cycle on the first cycle still, but I knew I needed to be writing for the next album, and because it would come up. And that's when I wrote that song. But in the middle of that, I knew all my co-writers I liked writing with were in Nashville. And I'd say the biggest thing, and one of the things I always will tell people who ask me advice, is surround yourself with people that are better than you. And I knew that these people were better songwriters than me. And I would bring in an inspiration. Like I'd bring in the initial, like, hey, here's my idea. And then they'd help me mold it because they were just better craftsmen at that. And I'm nowhere near, back then I was nowhere near the songwriter I am today. But I recognized that, and I knew I needed to be where there was better songwriters. And so somewhere in the middle of that cycle, I just knew, I told the guys, I was like, we need to move to Nashville. And so we can just always have access to these studios, these musicians, these writers that will inspire us and make us better,
And you said something about the relationships that you had already had, that you were coming and you were sleeping on people's couches and you were working with people like Kevin, who you worked with on that first New Medicine record. Was that an influential thing for you once you were here full time to kind of, have that support system of somebody who's in town who is crushing it?
Oh yeah. And that definitely helps. I would say though, Kevin and I have a mutual agreement of he was coming off of hits from the, mid 2000s, and he hadn't had a hit in a while. But I thought this is one of the best writers I've ever written with, and he just totally gets me. The first song we ever wrote together, me and Kevin, we wrote for the New Medicine album when I just got signed, and it was called Like a Rose. That's the first song we ever wrote, and it got cut. The next week, he's called me and said, hey, Meatloaf. And I'm like, Meatloaf? Yeah, Meatloaf wants to cut that song. He's going to call you this afternoon. And so anyways, that turned into a cut with Meatloaf, our first co-write. But I think Kevin and I just through the years, we've always just been no matter what, he didn't care that our band wasn't huge yet. He thought they could be. And I like this guy. And I wasn't I remember the label saying something like, well, when's the last time Kevin had a hit? And I'm thinking, huh? And when we were writing for the second album, that's when he wrote All About That Bass. And then the labels didn't ask when his next hit was.
They didn't have to.
So let's go into that. Actually, for people who don't know, you are good friends with Kevin Kadish, and he has written a lot of big songs. Is that something that you guys, talk about? And you're like, hey, man, we need some of that love on there. We need that All About That Bass feel here.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, Kevin and I, we started writing for the New Medicine stuff, right? And then he ended up producing the second New Medicine album. He loved that I was just daring. I was like, I'll do it. He's like, what if you tried something like Beastie Boys? I'm like, I love Beastie Boys. Give me the verse. Yeah. And I started rapping on it. And he was like, whoa, this kid will kind of try anything. But I recognized his craft for songwriting. And he and I have this same thing of we don't want to just be done just to be done. We want to be done when we feel like we got it. That's it. That's the hook. That's the chorus. That's the song. And there's a lot of people in town still, I would say, that, you write with. And I'm not dogging anyone in specific. And I've probably been guilty of this some days too, but it's just awesome. We got the lyrics finished and it sounds like a song and it's pretty good. All right, let's call it a day. And Kevin will never do that. He's just like, nope, not right. Verses, we got to come back tomorrow. Let's rewrite the verses. And it can be fatiguing, but he taught me, back then he was always like, we weren't ever trying to do anything but write the single every time. We're not well, let's just write a track to write a track. He's like, write the single, and I always go for it, And so I thought,
awesome.
If I try to write every song on my record like a single, then I'm going to have a lot better chances of having, a hit, you know what I mean? And that's him and I's philosophy is just we're not burning any time here. We're going to go for it every time. And it's been cool because I stood by Kevin when some of the labels were almost like, maybe you should work with a different producer. And I'm not sure when the last time he's had a hit was. And I was like, no, this guy's the guy. On the second record, me and him wrote probably 8 or 9 of the songs together, and out of the 12. just 50-50. And he's almost like the fifth band member, you know what I mean? Like he just gets where my head is lyrically, and we bounce stuff off of each other. And he really pushed the production on the second record too. But during that time, that's when he wrote all about that bass. Like I said, one day he came in and said, "Hey, this girl, they want me to write with her tomorrow." And I told someone I'd do it as a favor. And so and she honestly, dude, she honestly had nothing going on in town. I mean, she was like brand new writer, 18 or 19, whatever it was. Like, and I remember she wasn't 21. I just remember that because she couldn't drink. But anyways, she had nothing going on. And so he's kind of like, I don't know, I'm just doing this as a favor. We'll see what happens. And they wrote that song, and then he played it for me the next day. And we were in the middle of my record. I'm like, dang, dude, that's an awesome song. And you know, that record took us 3 or 4 months, but in the middle of that, Megan and I actually met through Kevin and we started dating a little bit. And, but through the middle of that, all of a sudden she got a record deal and all the world came at her really quick. And I've never seen something go from a demo to a master to on the radio to like a worldwide phenomenon. I mean, it was like, we were just sitting in the living room, like, what the heck is going on? Like 1 million views on YouTube in a day, the first day. And
wow,
I've never seen a song rocket so fast. And then, you know, Kevin wrote almost all the songs in that record with her, and he produced the whole record. And then it was a game changer, and everybody talked to Kevin differently. And he probably wouldn't have done our record for the price he did after that. But
they probably don't second guess you anymore.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
There's a quote that I read that I love of yours. And as soon as I read it, I immediately went, yep, that's a Jake quote. And it was, I make music for the front row, not music row.
Exactly.
Let's go into that, because especially from the first New Medicine record to the second New Medicine record, and you and I have had this conversation just, you know, hanging out. And you said there is a difference, but for you, it was to push it. It was to push it harder. It was to push the production. It was to do something that was different. And you're doing that on Music Row for sure. Has there been any pushback from anybody when it comes to what you're doing in Nashville?
Oh yeah. Even today, I mean, like I've become like, I'm you know, Nathan Chapman and Kevin Kadish are my producers that I work with, but I'm like, they're my mentors, and they've kind of mentored me as a producer. And all of a sudden in the last couple of years here, I started producing records myself and then co-producing all my records with them. But I'll do some stuff. I turned a song in with them the other day that I thought, hear me out. It's like a trap song with 808 and a banjo thing, like sampled all weird. And they were like, I don't know, dude. But I'm like, I don't know. Like, why not? I have to try this stuff. And you know what? Kevin's never scared of trying stuff. But I would say for sure I've scared off some people in Music Row. I think people, to be honest with you guys, this year I'm finally like, I kind of tried to keep these in. I don't want everyone to know I had this band because they'll think I'm too rock or whatever. I think I'm too country. And I'm like, you know what? I'm done with that. It's 2021. People are nuanced, and people like us who grew up on Eminem and Metallica, but also listened to Chesney and Tim McGraw because it was on the radio, and we listen to everything. And so, yeah, I have nuance to what I like as music. And I think people can fathom the fact that I would make a rock song and a country song. It's not out of the realm of possibilities. And I guess that attitude is what I take to Music Row. I'm just kind of like, I don't really care. I don't need to sound like all these other guys. I mean, I want to sound like me. And what makes me unique is that I wasn't a rock band and I do country. You know, the way I play a show for country, I take the same approach as if I was playing a rock show, you know?
That's awesome. I love that. And I love that attitude. And with that, sometimes, you know, one thing that I would like to note is we're all tattooed. So, which I want to, we got them. Everybody's got them. Yeah. So speaking of sleeves, tell us about writing that. Do you remember when you wrote that record?
100%. Yeah. I had been writing, I had gotten a publishing deal. This is after the second New Medicine record. We took a hiatus. Came to Nashville just to start writing songs, and I wanted to see, I don't know what I'm going to do, a solo project of some kind. I don't know what kind. And I started writing, and naturally I started writing these songs that sounded like country songs. And they were like acoustic, you know, love song thing here or breakup vibe here, but they were sounding country, you know what I mean? And I was inspired by all that. And I'd written, I think this is my second year writing on a publishing deal, and Nathan, I had a song called Family that we wrote, and Nathan Chapman, my producer, played it for Craig Wiseman, and Craig had said, "Oh my God, I want to meet this kid. Who is this?" And he said, "Oh, this is the guy we signed, and so you guys should write." And so then literally a week later, I was writing with Craig, and Sleeves was the first song we ever wrote. And I always knew I wanted to write something about, like, there's something about my stories. All my tattoos, people ask me, "Why'd you get that rose?" Or "Who's Jocelyn Rose? Is that your ex-girlfriend?" I'm like, "No, it's my sister. She passed away." And it's like a deeper story. Or, "What's with the truck? Oh, you like trucks?" And I'm like, "No, it's my grandpa's truck. I got it." You know what I mean? I was explaining myself to people. So anyways, that day I remember I better bring a good idea into Craig, because this is my chance, And I didn't know if that idea was any good or not, but I kind of told him it, and he liked it. And we were kind of messing around on a few things. And then he was like, sleeves, what sleeves? And he's like, heart of my sleeves. And then I'm like, there you go. And I had something called like ink on, I think I called something like ink on my arms, story on my arms, or something like that. And he turned that into sleeves, heart of my sleeve. And I was like, oh shit, like, here we go. And like I told you guys about being in the room with someone that's better than you, talk about that. I mean, Craig is the virtuoso master OG. Like, he's a killer, man. And so we started the song, and then he said, he was like, he had to go run and do an errand quick. And he was like, "Hey, sorry, I got to leave for just a little bit, like work on some verses, and I'll be right back." And so he was gone for like a little bit, and I started writing all these verses out. And then he came back, and I told him all the verses, but he basically took my verses and like proofread them and then made them way better. And that was our first co-write, and that's how that song came about. He just kept looking at my arms and saying, "What's that one? What's that about? Why'd you get the truck?" "Well, it's my grandpa's truck." And then that would just, the next thing I know, those lyrics were in the song,
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I used to get tattooed when something would change in my life, or, there was a time where I don't have as many that I'm like, this one means this. Sometimes I just got, like, I have a bowling pin on my leg. It literally means nothing. It just, I was going through something, and the artist that I went to, he had it on the wall and no one would get it. I was like, shoot, I'll get it.
Yeah.
So, sometimes there are those too.
Oh yeah, dude. This tiger, that's what I got that. I mean, I was like, I want a tiger. That looks awesome.
Yeah.
Put it on my arm. Let's go.
Did you really get one after you broke up with the girl though? Like, was there one that, like,
Oh, I haven't got one.
Okay.
Yeah. What's the, I'll be adding one in. Well, I haven't added one in yet, but
there you go.
I had to add one in for my fiance. That's what I'll have to add in.
There is other lines in there specifically that I always think about. You talk about, you've got the New Medicine line in there. Was that important to kind of sneak, kind of like an homage to the guys in there?
Yeah, well, Craig did that, and I don't know how he came up with that line, but he kind of smirked after he did it. Like, he goes, "I have this nurse, which is on my side over here, and it says New Medicine, and it's a nurse with a syringe." And he said, "What other tattoos do you got?" Because we kind of had went through the gamut, and we're kind of like, "Where did the truck? Where did the roses? What else you got?" And then, the name of my old rock band right under a nurse. Every time I'm feeling lonely, that medicine still works. And it was like, if the band was called New Medicine, there's so much to it, but it's like, most people probably just it goes right by them, like, "Oh, just whatever," But if you knew the band and you knew me, then you knew exactly what that meant. And I love stuff like that, where if you find a little nugget in a lyric where, like, I know why he said that, because, And so that was just like, that was where we went to expert level songwriting. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, oh my, he just met me and he just pulled that out of me like that. Like, he knew the name and the this and the nurse, and I don't know how he did that, but I still, try to learn from him every time we write.
It's funny, as you talk about writing with Craig, and I knew of Craig Wiseman specifically from some of the Kenny Chesney stuff and some of like the early like Phil Vassar stuff when I was a kid, reading through, liner notes and CDs, and just thinking, like, I did a quick Google search on Craig the other day just because I wanted to see how many there really were. And there's probably like 150 songs on Wikipedia that Craig has written. And even just like ones that you go, oh, I've never heard that song. I'm talking Brooks and Dunn Hillbilly Deluxe. Good Old Days, Phil Vassar, Everywhere, Tim McGraw. I mean, there is huge songs.
Like Dying, The Good Stuff, Summertime.
Boys Around Here. Like, I mean, there's so many. When writing with Craig, did you ever go, holy crap, you're Craig Wiseman. What in the hell am I doing here?
Oh, the first day. And I mean, people around town will warn you, like, man, he'll be the first person to tell you, like, you got anything better than that? You know what I mean? Like, if you don't kind of step up to the plate, kind of like, you're wasting my time here, dude. What are we doing? And he still says that to me sometimes. He's like, what are we doing? What are we doing? What do you got? Like, I got to bring something in there and be ready to go. He's like, I'm playing ball here, dude. Like, otherwise I'll just go right with Kenny Chesney, you know what I mean? Or whatever. And I love Craig, and I love that he's tough on people because he gets better songs out of it. But yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy to he's so down to earth that you wouldn't know that he has that many hits. Like, I think if people saw him at a bar, they'd be like, who's that guy? You know what I mean? Like, he's kind of wild, but he's so smart. My biggest admiration for Craig is his ability to adapt and to stay relevant. Like, there's a lot of writers that have had a run where it's like, wow, for these 5 years or these 10 years, this guy was the guy. And then they kind of fade away because their thing kind of dies out, and it's kind of like, well, people aren't cutting those kind of songs anymore. But Craig is like 90s hits, early 2000, Kenny Chesney, Tim McGraw. He's just getting cut after cut after cut. Number one, he was songwriter of the decade. And then 2010 hits, and he's like, I want to sign these two guys called Florida Georgia Line. And then he all of a sudden signs all the writers. He signs the band. He starts a record label. It's like unbelievable. And all of a sudden he has like a whole string of other hits with the whole, FGL, Chris Lane, all that stuff that came after. And then you get to like, the mid, 2010s, and all of a sudden he signs Morgan Wallen and then Jake Owen, and all of a sudden he has another number one last year with Jake Owen, another number one this year with Chasing You, Morgan Wallen, and then he goes back to his old trusty Kenny Chesney, number one Here and Now this year. I'm like, dude, like decades, he's still hitting the mark, and I think that's so cool.
That's awesome. I would love to just sit down and I would love to have Craig on the podcast, but I would also love to just sit down and hear Craig tell stories, because one of my favorite Craig stories that I heard him telling around is that he wrote Kenny Chesney's Young and they took the third verse out, but he always explains that he was mad because the third verse is actually the first verse. He wrote it backwards and Chesney took it out for a guitar solo.
It's funny. Yeah. I mean, he's got a million stories like that. I mean, it's cool to hear. I ask him sometimes kind of like, hey, how did that come about? He's, well, he just came in and I had this and he had that. And, it's fun to hear all those stories. He's a legend,
For sure. When we were talking about sleeves, you made a comment about how you guys leave little nuggets in songs. Now let's go into family. What was the response from all the people that you mentioned in there? Because you mentioned some of the guys from Medicine. You mentioned, other people around in your friend group. What was the response when that song came out?
I mean, it was really like, people made people smile, and it was the first time that I really just like let myself put my whole real life into a song. Like, I didn't sugarcoat. I didn't change any names or anything. It was like, there was nothing safe about it. I'm just going to say what it is, and I think people got it right away. Like, it just immediately, like, if you knew me and you didn't even have to know the characters, but you knew those people sound real,
Yeah.
And what I was talking about in the songs, Kevin had the idea. You always say this, Jake. You always say your friends are like family. And I'm like, yeah, we are. We're like family, man. And he's like, we should write that. And then he kind of had this little thing for the chorus. My friends are like, and I'm like, that's a cool melody. And then he's like, dude, just like freestyle the verse, like talk about your friends. And I was like, Brady's I just literally freestyled it, and they were writing down, like, what'd you say? And I'm like, I don't know. Dan's going in and out of rehab, because he was, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he ain't mad at me for saying, he knows it's true. But I'm like, you know what? He's still a good friend, you know what I mean? And Johnny, the last verse, we had written the two first verses, and the line about Leah, my ex, was funny. That was like just a fun like smile, like, it was saying, hey, you can break up with someone and you don't have to hate them. They're still your friend. And I mean, like, I have, you know what I mean? Like, you don't have to be enemies forever. And that was what that was. Like her and I are still friends. We're all good, even though we dated back then. And then I was like, it needs another verse. And I was like, what could it be about? It needs to really kind of touch the heart. And that's when we wrote about my friend Johnny in the last verse. But I think it touched a lot of people who could kind of insert those names and change them out for their own, you know?
And what did Leah say? That's always been my question there, because you do drop a line in there that it's what is it? They say you can't be friends with anyone you ever had sex with or any one of your exes, and then you just stop and go, "What up, Leah?" Like,
I don't know. I just thought, like, you know, she thought. I think everyone that thinks it's funny. It's lighthearted. It's not meant to be, you know, anything. And people at shows now go, "What up, Leah?" And it was actually Nathan that was like, "What up, Leah?" Because I had said I was trying to get a line in there like that, but and he kind of said, "What up?" And I was like, "That's pretty funny." And it's kind of like a one-liner now, you know. When you have shirts that say "What up, Leah."
When you played it at Grizzly Rose, when you were opening for Eli Young Band, there was people that didn't know the song, and I was with some of your friends and family, and my fiance and I were there, and everybody in the crowd just laughed when you got to that part. And we all, you know, all of us were like, "What up, Leah?" You know, because we knew it. But exactly. Everybody else just chuckled. You could hear the crowd laugh. Like, yeah, so I thought that was fun.
I love when there's nuggets in songs like that. You know, another like, yeah, just something like if you're listening careful, you're gonna hear something. You know what I mean?
Tell us about Favor.
Favor's another one of another. These are just stories from my life, you know. Again, it was like I just went through a breakup, different girl. This literally the verses were just verbatim what happened. I met a girl, moved out to LA, and we met in LA, and then I moved out there with her, and the whole song was just literally what I was going through right then. I just broke up with her. It was a bad breakup, you know, there was cheating going on. Yeah, it was just like I just put it down on paper right when it was fresh, you know what I mean? And same thing, like I put the dude's name in there. Like I was friends with a guy that she cheated with me on, and I was just like, "What the hell is up with these people?" And we got into the writers' room that day, and Clint, my friend, was like, I was telling them the story, and there's another guy, Josh Miller, who wrote the song "Meant to Be." He's very just like loose, and he's a great guy. And he goes, "Man, sounds like she did you a favor, bro." I was telling him the story, and then Clint was, "We should write that, dude." And then he's like, "You did me a favor." And I'm like, "All right, let's go." And I sat down at the piano and started playing the chords, and met you in LA. We just started like, "What else?" And I'm like, I just said the next thing, you know, next thing that happened, you know what I mean? And all that stuff is true. Her grandma was like, "Hey, Jake, if you ever want a ring, you can." And so I put that in the song, you know what I mean? All the stuff. I put the dude's name in the song, you know, just thought, why not? Why not be real, you know?
I love that you do that. I love that you put yourself into your music because, you know, some people are just good at coming up with stories about people that they met or someone else's story. But I love that you just actually put your life into your music. And I'm a huge fan, honestly. Like I didn't know much about you until Braley introduced me to your music, and I'm a huge fan. I listen to your music all the time. I love it. I think it's great. So I love to know that like a lot of this stuff is real and that you're actually telling real stories. I think that's awesome. It just makes it that much better to me. But have they heard this song? Do you know if any of the people?
Oh yeah.
You ever get bad feedback of some of the stuff you say?
I sent it to my ex like right after I wrote it. I knew it was good because all my friends were like when they heard it, I was like, "There's that dude, Mike. I knew it was like." And I sent it off. I have like a link of the demo, and I just sent it to a few people. And I was just like, I don't know, drunk or something one night, and I just sent it to her. And then she was like, "Why would you send me this?" And I'm like, well, you inspired it, you know, like kind of like it was kind of like bye.
Yeah.
You want points on the back end, or what do you think?
And it was good. I can't tell you guys how like what a great feeling it is to write a great song about a real thing. And they was like, there's no better payback that I play that song at every show, and they were playing it on the radio, and I'm like, there you go. It's just, you know, nothing better than for a breakup than that. So
you went through those first few songs that you put out were very like super storytelling, very touching, you know, breakups, talking about, you know, you threw in the lines about your sister, which you had in, you know, Little Sister. And then you come out and you put out Tractor Town, the EP. And that is like a party the whole time, the whole thing. And we just had Hunter Phelps on last week. So it'll be Hunter's episode and then your episode. Let's go into Better in a Bar, because that is both KJ and I's like absolute favorite song right now.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Yeah, well, that song just kind of came up. I was writing with Nick Donnelly, Hunter Phelps, and Kanan Smith. And I mean, it was a stout lineup. I mean, I just knew like something's gonna happen in this room. And I don't know who threw it out. Maybe Nick threw it out or someone threw it out. Just said beer tastes better in a bar. And I was like, I don't know if we could write that or what, but like, you know what I mean, man? Like a beer, if you just drink it at the bar, it's just something different about it. Like you just feel different when you drink it. You're like, you can sit at your house and then crack a can and it's fine. But when you're sitting up at a bar and you order a beer and out of the tap and it's different. The atmosphere is different. That's why I think, people go to so many bars. But we had that title, and then we were over at Tree Vibes Music, and we were just kind of hanging out. It was a very loose day, and I started playing those like kind of chords on the guitar, and I don't know who kind of came up with the verse melody. Maybe Hunter. There couldn't have been four people that were more experts on drinking beer in a bar than us four. So we kind of nailed the lyrics, I felt like, and we were having fun because with that many people in the room that we knew were lyricists and songwriters, like, usually it's a 2-way or 3-way, right? But this is a 4-way. But it ended up being awesome because I felt like every line in that song was like, there's stuff behind every line,
Did you go into it knowing that you were going to write that track for you?
No, actually, we wrote, Kanan was cutting songs and we wrote it. And I remember when we started the day, Nick had that title. And then it was like, oh, shoot, I just put it. He had Beer Drinking Weather. And he's like, oh, it's about to come out. Kanan had that. And we were kind of like, well, man, this is a really good idea. And he's like, well, maybe I could do 2 beer songs. I don't know. Let's just write it and see what happens. And then when we got done with it, I played it for my publisher. And he's like, now that's a country smash. That's a hit. And they actually sent it to Chesney, but I don't think it ever got to Kenny. It got to the first wave of Gatekeeper, and then it got whatever. And we just sent the work tape. But I thought the work tape even was just, you could hear the song. It was a really cool song. And I sent it to Craig, actually. And he said, no, that's a good one right there. And so I felt like it was something, And then I remember talking to Kanan about it. And I said, hey, man, are you going to cut this? And he said, well, now we're at the second. I talked to Hunter, and I'm like, hey, do you care if I cut this? And he said, no, I don't care. And there was actually talk for a second of us 3 doing it together. There's 3 verses. And I asked them if they wanted to be on it. And we were going to do it. And then it was like, well, I can't do it this month because I got a release coming out here. And I got one coming out here. And I just thought, I'm going to put the song out. I love the song. And so that's why I just went in and cut it and put it on my record.
The line that gets me every time is hometown dirt on broken boots. And immediately I just think about, growing up in a small town where, you're always dirty, man. And that's your hometown dirt. And immediately I was like, I love that line.
That's awesome. There's just a bunch of lines in that song. I mean,
long cut skull and your whiskey jack. Like,
it's just fun. What's the second verse? I'm trying to remember. Nothing cuts like a case knife cuts.
Yeah.
I love and the NASCAR. Oh, there's just so much. Never be number 3 NASCAR. I mean, it was just fun. It was just, we were writing about stuff we thought was cool. And I love that song.
I thought that Cold Beer Pretty Girls was the absolute summer smash there. And that's my fiance's favorite song.
Really?
Not
that's
just
awesome.
Because we're all friends, but that is like her absolute favorite song of yours. So if I didn't mention it,
awesome.
She'd be listening and kicking my butt for it.
Yeah, well, that song I wrote with Chris Tompkins and Chris Lindsay, and Chris Tompkins famously wrote, Before He Cheats and Drunk on a Plane, and he's had 15 number ones. But that song was just a kind of a ditty. He was like, we were trying to write something. I was feeling some kind of a summer vibe. And man, he's like, well, this isn't it, but it could be something like cold beer and pretty girls, the 2 best things in the world. I'm like, what do you mean? Kind of something like this. I'm like, that's it. That sounds like a stadium anthem to me. I'm like, I can just see 50,000 people with beers saying cold beer and pretty girls, 2 best things in the world. I'm like, when you're at a concert in the summer and there's pretty girls around drinking beer, you're like, this is the greatest thing since, this is the best. There's nothing better.
Yeah.
And we went and wrote that. And man, I play that song live and it's always a fan favorite. And you know what? I dropped it in February and the pandemic hit in March, and I haven't been able to go on the road and really jam it, but I'm ready for next year.
When you say Lucky Brand Cutoffs off, I was like, yep. because KJ and I went and saw Garth Brooks together last year, and that was basically everybody in the crowd. And that's exactly what we did. We stood around with KJ's wife, who is a saint, by the way, who was 9 months pregnant and dealt with us tailgating all day. And my fiance. And that's exactly what it was. Everybody was out there in their boots and their Garth Brooks button-down shirts and their Lucky Brand jeans.
My favorite line is got a boombox beating on a pine needle dance floor. Like, you got pine needles, like, when you're like on a riverside or like by a lakeside and there's this pine needles all under there, and your picnic table and your the Bluetooth is out and your girl's dancing or whatever. It's just, it felt like such a colorful line. I love it.
Tell us about writing for FGL and how that was for you to kind of get into that vein with those guys.
Well, that's another, like, I have a full circle moment with New Medicine, which was me and Dan went and saw Avenged Sevenfold in like 2006 in LA, and we were just 17 and we were going to maybe move out there to go to school or something. I don't know what we were thinking, but we saw them then. And then 2011, we opened an arena show for them and we met them, and that was great. Kind of the same story with FGL. I remember hearing Cruise and all their stuff and just thinking, now that's exactly what I want to do. And remember me and Dan from New Medicine going like, those guys are killing it. Like, every song on the records, I'm like, that sounds like a smash. Like, I can just sing along to these songs. And, the connection with Craig, he had signed them and everything. Like, even though that was a connection, like, there's layers to how things work and relationships work, and people have camps. And I remember when I first was kind of like, I really want to write with FGL guys, and I'd love to get a song that I was trying to, I don't know that I was even at the level yet that I could write with them or write a song for them, because everybody in town's trying to write a song on their record, and at the time I remember it was like Michael Hardy was like writing tons of stuff with them. And I wrote with Michael a bit back then, but it was just, you got to find a camp, right? And it's like, I'm coming from the rock world, and like they always say, this is a 10-year town. Well, I've been doing country for like 2 or 3 years now. And now I guess now 4, but 2016, I guess I'm a publishing deal. But anyways, I felt like I've been doing music. I've had 2 record deals before this, you know what I mean? And with my band, I've written 1,000 songs, but I'm like brand new to Music Row. And so I had to work my way up. And I remember, so it kind of, how I met those guys was through, there's another artist named Red Farron, and Red, he's signed to Tree Vibes and now Warner Brothers Records. He's going to have an album coming out this year, but him and I hit it off because he's kind of like a rapper guy that could sound like Post Malone, but he's like country as cornbread, like from White House, Tennessee. But I think he was on the Professional Dirt Biker. He met those guys and got signed to their publishing deal, and I was writing songs with him, and he was never afraid to kind of push the envelope. I was like, when we wrote this, we were writing one day, and I said, dude, what if we just like, I played this little loop I made, and then I was like, I don't know, that sounds kind of like a Drake song. He's like, who cares, dude? Let's write to that. That sounds awesome. And it was Countryside, and then he said something about, can we write something called Countryside? And then him and our friend Michael started singing the chorus, and Michael Whitworth. And then the verses was, I was like, man, could you just rap the verses? Like, downtown looks a little busy. Yup. And it was like, he's like, I love that. And then we just were flying. So we wrote that song, and I remember just thinking, I turned it in, and then everyone was like, now that, who is that? What is that? Like, I haven't heard that. That's like straight up rap. We're not even like pretending. We're not, you know what I mean? There's not much about it that wasn't just like straight up, And so we got a great reaction, but then Blake is signed to them, to Florida Georgia Line's publishing company. And so he turned it in, and it was kind of like I remember they said they loved it. And then I thought, well, that's cool. They're hearing my songs now. Like, I have a connection to those 2 guys who I think are so cool. And then it wasn't that long after that all of a sudden they're like, I think they're going to cut it. And then all of a sudden I was upstairs. They were still with Big Loud at the time. They've parted ways. But at the time they were still with Big Loud. And I was upstairs writing with Craig. And then I'm getting an email. My publisher keeps calling me. I'm like, what the heck? I'm like, dude, I'm writing with Craig. Like, what the heck? What do you call me? He's like, you just got an FGL cut, dude. They're cutting Countryside. Joey and Moy needs your files from your track. Send them over as soon as you can. I'm like, dude, oh my God, this is crazy. And I'm like, dude, Craig, I got an FGL cut. And like, even though he was like part of their thing, then there's like, they chose the songs and the label. And so like, I don't even know if he knew yet and they had just picked it like, hey, we want to cut that song, and Joey liked it, and so that's how that relationship started. And then not long after that, maybe 6 months, I kept writing with Kanan, who signed to them, and then Blake, and I started writing these songs, and we actually had another song that they cut, and then they decided they're going to do it with Blake instead, which is Blake Red Farron. Anyway, so Red Farron's cutting that other song, but I just kept turning songs in, and they kept saying like, who wrote that? And I was like, well, I wrote that with Jake. And then the next one, hey, who wrote that? Well, I was with Jake. And then at one point, Dane, my publisher, just said, hey, man, you busy today? BK wants you to come out and write with him and Kanan. I'm like, oh, shit, like, for real? And like, yeah. And I'm like, all right. And I was like super nervous, but went out to BK's house here in Nashville, and we started writing, and that kind of started a relationship there. And then fast forward, that was like a year ago. Well, actually, it was at the beginning of this year, I think. It just kind of kept escalating. And then Blake and I, Red Farron and I, kept writing this summer. And then BK started hitting me up like, hey, you want to write in town? So me and Red Farron and BK wrote in town. Like I said, Tyler and BK were both like loving the songs. Every time I turn a song in, like Red Farron would text me like, dude, the boys love this song and whatever. And so I knew I was kind of getting in with them a little bit. And now BK is doing, they just announced they're kind of each doing a solo thing. And so the last couple of months I've been going down to the beach to BK's house, writing for his solo thing. And it's been so cool and so surreal to get to know someone. And then after that first or second write, like the barrier is broken, like with Craig. And now I'm just like, man, these are great guys. They're so fun. They're like my bros now. And I mean, so it's pretty surreal.
I'm interested to hear his solo stuff is going to sound like. Can you tell us a little bit about what that's like? You know, he's not necessarily the front man in the group, right? He doesn't present that way. So I'm interested to see and hear how he presents as the lead and what that's like.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I had no idea what to expect. And I felt the same way. I'm like, I don't know. Like, but the deeper you dive in, you start realizing like BK wrote Cruise. You know what I mean? Like BK's on a lot of big songs, and he's written a bunch of hits for other artists. He's like so smart business wise and branding wise, like the Old Camp whiskey and all that stuff. Like he's so smart with all that stuff. And so when we went down there, he's like, let me just play you a couple of things that like, just to put you in the right mood. He's from Florida. He lives in Grayton Beach, down there in Florida. He's just got that whole beach surfer, I don't know, just Florida guy, country Florida guy vibe. And he played me a couple songs. I can't say what they're called, but sure. I'll just say that like it immediately made me go like, oh, this is not like, he's not just doing like a whatever side project. He's going for it. Like these songs are badass. And I was like, and he had a whole direction and a whole brand and a whole thing. And it felt so much as I got to know him. I'm like, dude, this is totally your thing. Like this is who you are. And I wouldn't have necessarily got that with FGL. You know what I mean? And I know for a fact, Tyler's got the same thing going on where Tyler's like crazy pop, like rap. He loves that kind of stuff. And like, he's probably going to do some stuff that's crazy in this way. But it's cool to see them both be able to do their thing. And so throughout this whole thing, I was just working on a song with him this morning. He just called me, but we were there like right before Christmas, and we wrote 4 songs, and they're cutting a couple this week. I'm co-producing a couple things, I think, but Corey Crowder's producing it, and it's been really cool to work with Brian, and I can't wait for people to hear it, because I think they're gonna see what he really is, and be surprised at what he's capable of. So.
And if people go back and listen to that first FGL record, there is a lot more of his voice featured than there is now. And BK ain't no slouch when it comes to singing. Like,
no, he's a great singer. And I think when the songs are tailor made to him, like these ones are, it's even like, you know, it's like anybody. If you're accompanying someone else, you're kind of like taking the back seat a little bit. But he's great at that. And but now with these songs, they're tailor made for him, and him being in the lead in the front seat, and he crushes it. Honestly, like it's gonna be really good. And I was so impressed. And I think he was telling me he played it for label Scott Borchetta, and Scott said the same thing of like, damn, dude, you ain't playing. Like these are like hits, and like they have a thing to it, and it makes you want to go like, what else? What other songs you got? Because it just puts you in a mood. So I'm excited about that.
Man, we could chat all day about everything going on in Music Row with you. And, you know, you write with some of the biggest names in town, and, you're working on this awesome new BK record, and we're all looking forward to hearing it. And we're looking forward to hear more stuff from you too. So what's next from you?
Yeah. So this year, like I got 5 songs. I've just kind of putting the finishing touches on them. I've been in the studio all week this week. And then I decided this year I'm doing some New Medicine songs. I'm kind of bringing it out. Like I've been writing and producing Adelita's Way, who's one of my favorite bands I used to tour with and open up for. And Rick, the singer, gave me a shot, 4 years ago. Hey man, I think you could produce a track for us. And I was like, let me try it. I'll try. And it was Notorious was the first song we did. And it's got tons of streams and it's done really well for them. And it's one of their biggest hits now. And it gave me the confidence of like, man, I can do that. Being a better songwriter now. And now I'm going back and I'm like, man, I want to write some New Medicine stuff because I really still love rock music. Rick kind of gave me carte blanche creatively to kind of do what I would really want to do. And I felt like, well, now I don't have a label. I don't have a manager telling me what to do. I'm just going to do whatever I want. I don't even have to have another producer if I don't want. I do work with Kevin a lot still, but anyways, so I'm putting out, I have a song with Adelita's Way and New Medicine coming out. We just got it mastered. It'll be out in the next 6-8 weeks, I'd say. Like we're just figuring out exactly what day it's going to come out. But, and then I have like 5 or 6 Jake Rose songs ready to go. And I just wrote one right before Christmas that I'm like, I feel like is game changer for my whole project, where I wrote it by myself. It was a huge epiphany for me of like, the course of writing songs for 15 years. I mean, I started when I was 12, in my bedroom writing crappy songs, but this many years and, you co-write so much. And then finally I was working on a demo and I just started playing this lick and I started singing this thing. And then I just thought, I'm going to just write this. This sounds like me. And I wrote this song by myself that I'm so excited about. And I played it for BK and Red Farron and they were like, dude. And then, they flipped out on it and everybody on my team flipped out about it. So I'm excited. I got 5 or 6. I mean, I'm going to have songs. I write, 120, 150 songs a year. So I'm going to be, putting music out this year. I've decided why keep them all and why be so precious with them. I'm going to put stuff out that I think is dope. Love and that. If it's the rock song, if it's a country song, whatever I'm feeling at the time, I have 2 New Medicine songs I'm ready to put out that I've finished. And I have 5 or 6 Jake Rose ones like done, ready to go. And now that this pandemic is looking like it's winding down, and I mean, it's not over, but I'm going to start dropping songs like it's hot.
I know I texted you the other day and I was like, I got to be a part of this New Meds reunion somehow, some way. Yes, I don't know what I got to do. Sure. I'll come out and tech for y'all, whatever.
Yeah, for sure, dude.
I just need to be a part of this.
There's going to be something. I don't know. And I can't wait to get on the road again. As soon as they open up for shows, I'll be out there. So
yeah, man, when you come back, we'll have to get together in person and do another one of these and talk about everything else that's going on.
100% for sure.
For sure, man. And we thank you so much for jumping on with us. And, the whole goal here is to pull back the curtain on some of the stuff that you're hearing in Nashville and also give people the opportunity who listen to this to find people like you who are writing big songs in Nashville, but also you have your own stuff going. That's really damn good.
Really good.
Thank you guys. I appreciate the opportunity. I think it's cool that you guys are going behind the curtain like that because it's hard to tell other people to explain to them what I do, and if you can't just say like, I have the #1 song on the radio right this second, it's like, well, how do you make a living, Jake? And I'm like, well, I do this, and this, and I have this going on. I'm putting songs out here and I'm doing that, playing shows, producing this guy, writing songs for that guy. And it all adds up to this interesting career I've built. And I appreciate you guys kind of going under the hood a little bit and checking it out.
Absolutely. And we'll definitely have you back on. And, once we started this, you were on the list of people that we definitely had to have on. And then when you were giving me crap on Facebook, I was like, okay, it's time.
Yeah, for sure. I was like, wait a second. I saw like you guys' logo, which all that stuff, all your branding looks awesome. And I thought, wow, that looks, it's great, dude. And I was like, these guys are serious. And then I'm like, oh,
we're trying.
My buddies. I'm like, all right, hold on. Like, why am I not on this podcast?
That's awesome.
It was funny. I told KJ, we have to get a couple under our belt before we have my close friends on. And so when you had said that, and it was funny because we had Hunter on and Hunter was like, oh, tell Jake hi. Tell Jake hi. And we're like, okay.
Yeah, for sure. Me and him are always texting about deer hunting and stuff, but that's
exactly what we talked about right at the start. We talked about hunting for like 20 minutes.
That's great, dude. Well, I appreciate you guys. And dude, I'll come back and hang with you guys, have a beer, and hopefully I'll be playing a show out your guys' way sometime here soon.
Definitely.
Absolutely, man. Now, where can people find you?
You can find me Instagram, Jake Rose Music, TikTok, all that, Twitter, everything's Jake Rose Music, Facebook. So yeah, check it all out. I'm kind of leaking songs this year, so I just decided I'm not gonna be precious. I'm dropping stuff here and there. So yeah, follow me on there and you'll hear new stuff.
And if you're looking for some of the stuff that we talked about on the podcast today, it's in our Hook podcast playlist. We'll make sure Jake is at the top right under this episode. It'll be a whole stack of Jake songs. So if you heard something that we were talking about in here, like Favor or the Tractor Town EP, it's definitely going to be in that playlist. So make sure you go follow us and follow Jake. And man, it's been so much fun. We could have talked for 2 hours at this point.
Seriously, I know.
And we'll catch up soon, man.
All right. See you guys. Thanks so much.